Recording button started. Okay, recording. Um, yeah. Hey everyone, welcome back to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'm your host Avik, and today we are diving into a topic that affects so many people but is often misunderstood, which is gut health. Yeah. And if you have ever struggled with the digestive issues, felt overwhelmed by the number of diets out there, or wondered like why certain foods just don't sit right with you, or something like that, so then this episode is for you. Because joining us today is the Courtney Koi. So welcome to the show, Courtney.
Thank you so much, Avik. I'm super excited to be here.
Lovely, lovely. So, before we start, I'll quickly love to introduce you to all the listeners. Dear listeners, Courtney is a nutritional therapy and functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. So, she specializes in helping goal oriented lifelong learners get to the root of their gut and autoimmune symptoms so they can live an active, fulfilling life. So her own battle with IBS and colitis has shaped her passion for helping others navigate the complex world of digestive health. And today we will talk about how an elimination diet can be a game changer in identifying food triggers, the emotional and the mental toll of gut dysfunction, and the tools that you need to start reclaiming your health. So, why do it? Get ready to get to the root of your gut issues and let's get started. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited.
Lovely, lovely. So, to start with, Courtney, your journey is truly inspiring, and from there what I can feel like you have faced so many challenges with your own digestive health. So if you can take us back to the beginning, when did you first realize something wasn't right?
Yeah, so when I reflect back, actually, I had some level of digestive dysfunction all the way back to childhood.
Mm,
As a kid, actually, I was pretty healthy. I was really active. I grew up with three younger brothers. We were very sports
mm,
oriented, did a lot of activities, different sports growing up. So generally, I always thought of myself as healthy, but from a fairly young age, like I would say as far back as I can remember, like even third, fourth grade of elementary school, like I would get these regular stomach aches. And I remember as I got a little bit older and I started to hit like my teenage years, I would walk home from school with a stomach ache and I would have to like lay down on the couch in my house with like a pillow under my stomach to like alleviate that pressure and pain. And it would actually do it amazingly. So I would just lay there for 20, 30 minutes. I would feel better. I would get up and then everything would be okay. But, you know, I think
mm,
in the time I grew up, kid of the 80s and 90s, right? Like it, my parents weren't the type of parents that would worry exorbitantly about stuff like that. So it was kind of just normalized as like something particular to me, and I was healthy otherwise. So that kind of was always going on from a fairly young age all the way into adulthood. And then it wasn't until I got into college in my 20s and I was doing a lot of just intense athletic training. I had gotten into collegiate rowing and then later started to compete in triathlon. So I always had this interest in like sports and performance. And so that sort of fueled my early interest in nutrition. But I think back at that time, I didn't realize that that intense training and demand on the body was also setting the stage for more digestive dysfunction. And so as I got a little bit older, and I guess
right.
the other piece I should mention too, Avik, is I was also doing a vegetarian diet around that time too. Like I was actually a vegetarian for about 10 years. That's a whole other story. But again, at the time, I thought that this would all be very helpful towards being a healthier person, not
Yeah.
realizing that some of these factors were setting the stage for some digestive issues. And so as I got a little bit older and was doing all this training, I was still having the stomach aches, but then I started to have more like periods of like tendency towards loose stool, bowel urgency, where I'd have to suddenly run to the bathroom. That was really embarrassing. And then also just interruptive, right? Like it was at times like when I was more flared, it was hard to plan on activities or get through my day without this fear of like my body not cooperating. So I tried a lot of things on my own in the beginning. Like I tried toying with my diet. I've always been a lifelong learner, so I was very much interested in starting to research nutrition on my own. I got interested in Chinese medicine. I had some experience with that as a patient, taking Chinese herbs, which were helpful to a point. But things kind of continued to break down. And so, long story short, I ended up going in to see a GI doc in my late 20s. That was my first experience. They did the full workup on me. Nothing abnormal was found. At that point in time, I was given very basic recommendations like take a probiotic. You've got IBSD. We don't really have much else to offer you. And then I kind of had a few years where things were okay in some ways. And then I kind of like fall back into more symptoms and then things would stabilize. And it wasn't until after I had my first child and went through the career change of becoming an entrepreneur and started to really work longer hours. And that put a stress again on my body and mental, emotional aspects, right? That
Right.
really again set the stage for things to take a pretty serious downturn. So all my symptoms came back with a vengeance. This was really kind of the point that catapulted me into becoming a nutrition therapy practitioner and then eventually a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. And with those two trainings, I really started to understand for the first time like what I was doing with my diet that was not helping my IBS symptoms. And so I was able to make like good adjustments to finally start to get some symptom relief. And then later, I got into doing specialized root cause testing, which gave me the missing pieces of like, why was I having so many food sensitivities and why was I having this lifelong gut struggle? And that answered a lot of questions that the conventional GI docs weren't able to answer for me. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Wow, that's awesome, I have to say. And okay, I mean, it's really incredible like how your personal struggles led you to a path of the deeper understanding and eventually helping others. I mean, so many people go through years of the trial and error, but just like you did. So that's great. And um also like you have talked about how your gut issues affected your mental health and even you feel like the worst mom ever. And
Mhm.
uh, so can you share more about the emotional side of the chronic gut problems?
Oh, yeah, 100%. There's such a strong connection between the gut and the brain. And even modern research is just reaffirming this more and more. Something that the listeners might be familiar with is this huge nerve called the vagus nerve that kind of runs from the brain to the gut. It kind of innervates all of the major organs in the core of the body. And there's a lot of information that can travel back and forth between the gut and the brain. And so, what's so fascinating is just my own personal experience is that when my digestive health was at its worst, my brain health was also at its worst. I was more likely to feel more mood instability, not as like peaceful and calm as I would typically want to be feeling or feeling, right? Just your whole perception of reality, right, gets filtered through the mental emotional state of the brain. And so, although this is something that I think isn't quite as recognized yet, just broadly, it is a very real thing. And I can say from my work with clients, it's very, very common that when I'm doing an interview with a prospective client, their primary concern might be like a digestive issue like IBS, but then secondary to that, they'll often note that they've had a history of depression or anxiety. And a lot of the clients I work with also come to me on SSRI medications that
Mhm.
presumably they brought into the mix as they noticed they were starting to have more of these brain symptoms. And so the hope in this is that if you have, a significant mental emotional challenge you're dealing with, and even if you don't have digestive symptoms, there's a really good chance that gut imbalance and deeper issues going on in the gut are playing a role in your mental emotional challenges, right? And so that means just by doing that work and taking a more holistic approach, there's a lot of opportunity to improve like mental health in my experience and just what I've seen.
Mhm. Understood. So, okay, and here is like, how can people struggling with the similar feelings start to shift their mindset and find hope in their healing journey?
Yeah. So I think your question is kind of like, is it possible for people to achieve like resolution to their symptoms through a holistic approach? Is that right, Avik? I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So 100% hope in my experience. Like I said, I would almost say like the vast majority of clients I've worked with, and this is where kind of the whole food sensitivity, nutritional piece is huge,
Mm,
just in my experience. Often, just by working in the beginning on looking at the
mm,
foods they're eating and making some recommendations and adjustments that move them in the right direction, whether that's identifying likely food triggers or improving the quality of the foods they're eating and reducing the more inflammatory foods that they're eating on a regular basis, that
mm,
tends to be the thing I see shifts the needle the fastest. More than anything, more than even doing the testing and getting the deeper data points that can explain why they're having, this major gut struggle in the first place. And so, to that point, like I've seen time and time again, people come in quite symptomatic. It's impacting their ability to function, have a good quality of life. And then
mm,
within a 1 to 2 month time frame, through making dietary adjustments, they're
mm,
noticing they're getting better bowel stability, less bloating. Energy improvement is huge in the
mm,
population I work with. Sometimes people are tired, but they've just sort of normalized it. And then once their digestive health starts to improve, they notice their
mm,
energy improves because generally speaking, absorption gets better, right? When the gut starts functioning better. So, of course, energy levels are going to improve. And they're just amazed at how much better they're feeling. And so, if this is
mm,
a way of trying to resolve symptoms of IBS or IBD that you've never considered, I mean, I've just seen
mm.
time and time again really great improvement, and sometimes from some very foundational, simple
Mm.
changes just working with diet alone.
Sure. That's a great one, yeah. And also, like, if someone who is listening right now and thinking, like, this sounds like me, yes, I need to start healing my gut, then what's the first step they should take?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I
Uh-huh.
always say the first step is becoming aware that there are options besides drugs or surgery, right? Like those tend to be kind of the two go-to things that regular doctors will offer for the majority of conditions that, are chronically symptomatic. A lot of people in my experience have also tried things
Mm,
like fiber and probiotics, and those can help sometimes, and they can
mm,
sometimes help to a point, but often it's not enough and it's not getting to the deeper root cause issues. So I think the first step is just becoming aware that there is, another approach, working on diet, working on lifestyle factors. And then, the next thing would be just looking at the foods you're eating. Now, this is always the hard part, I think, for the regular person because there are so many dietary fads out there right now, and there's so much differing guidance when it comes to diet. And the really tricky part with people struggling with IBS and IBD symptoms, especially, is that healthy foods or foods that we generally think of as healthy can often be triggers for those people just because they have more complex things going on with the gut. Their systems are just inherently more reactive. And so what I tend to find is that people will often make a little headway by doing some research on their own, whether it's looking at getting out the biggest food triggers. The place I always start with my population, 9 times out of 10, is getting people to successfully remove wheat from their diet because there's such a strong correlation with wheat sensitivity and all manner of digestive health disorders. However, even that step can be daunting because it's kind of everywhere, at least in the United States, and it can be hard for people to do it successfully. So, and then beyond that, I think it can just get very overwhelming very quickly because people just get confused about, well, where do I go from here? So, the simple starting point would be if you're eating wheat on the regular, you've got these symptoms, best you can start there by getting that out, and then over time, seeing if things are improving. But just what I've seen in my experience is it can often take just getting that guidance and help navigating the dietary piece with somebody who really, kind of knows this area well and has helped a lot of people reverse things like IBS. So yeah.
Lovely. Great. So, I mean, Courtney, I mean, this has been such an insightful conversation, and for the listeners who want to learn more about your working with you or accessing your resources, where can they find you?
So best way to find me is through my website, which is just my first
Uh-huh.
name and last name, Courtney Cowie, COWIE.com. If you
Mm.
go there at the very top, I've got a little button that says free e-guide. So you can click on that. And I've got a really nice starting point for people struggling particularly with the symptoms of IBSD and IBD. So kind of more the bowel urgency scenario. And so those are really truly my best simple do it yourself starting tips that if you're in that category, you might find that really, really helpful.
Hmm, exactly. That's perfect. Lovely. Great. So, I mean, it's a really, really incredible discussion, Courtney, and I have to say, your story and expertise are truly invaluable. And today, you have given us so much to think about and the insights into the importance of identifying food triggers, taking a root cause approach to the gut health, and the emotional resilience needed along the way. So, as always, dear listeners, if you have enjoyed this episode, do not forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. And until next time, take care of your gut, take care of your mind, and keep striving for a healthy mind and a healthy life. So, with this, thank you so much.
Thank you, Avik.